the Linguaverse Episode 17 Language and Time Arc 3, Hidden Tongues and Living Worlds. Welcome back to the Linguaverse. We've walked a long road together already, from the roots of speech and symbols in Arc 1 through the philosophy and future of language in Arc 2. Every step has been about recognizing that words are not passive tools, they are living forces. Arc 1 asked, what is language? Where did it come from? What does it do to us and through us? We traced memory through words, the way the tongue remembers what the mind forgets. We wandered through symbols, spells, taboos, and mimicry. We confronted how language was never neutral, from the first chants around the fire to the modern contracts and curses that still bind us today. Arc 2 shifted focus. We left the beginnings and asked instead, what is the future of language? We examined how AI clones voices, how English mutates faster than any one culture can contain it, and how silence itself sometimes speaks louder than words. We explored consciousness, the linguistic self, reality as constructed through discourse, and the future of the spell, the way words enchant and control us in systems of science, politics, and algorithms. That arc closed with Episode 16, The Last Word, a reflection on how language ends, shifts, and continues beyond our own voices. And now we begin Arc 3, Hidden Tongues and Living Worlds. This arc is not about origins or endings. It is about the spaces in between. The hidden layers of language that we live inside without always noticing. The grammars that shape our memory. The metaphors that organize our perception. The echoes that slip into silence. The ways words are traded, spent, stolen, and reframed. Where Arc 1 was about birth and Arc 2 about futures, Arc 3 is about dwelling. About what it means to live inside language every day, to breathe in its atmospheres, to inherit its grammars without question, and to sometimes break them open to find new air. We begin with one of the most invisible yet powerful structures of all, time. Because language doesn't just name objects. It doesn't only describe feelings. It doesn't only classify people. It shapes how we experience the very flow of time itself. Every verb you use, past, present, or future, places you somewhere in history. Every should have, could have, will be, bends the horizon of your awareness. Every tense is not just grammar, it is a map of time. And what fascinates me most is how differently languages map this terrain. In English, we live inside a tense-heavy system. Past, present, future, all carefully distinguished, layered with auxiliary verbs, conditionals, and modal shades of possibility. I walked. I was walking. I had been walking. I might have walked. Each variation subtly alters the world. But not every culture does this. Some languages hardly mark tense at all. Others divide time not into past and future, but into visible and invisible, known and unknown, certain and uncertain. In some communities, the future is not a fixed inevitability, but an open horizon of maybes. In others, the past is not sealed behind us, but constantly revisited through story, memory, and ritual. This means that when we speak, we don't just describe time. We perform it. We create habits of attention that either trap us in regret, project us into anxiety, or ground us in present awareness. For me, this isn't abstract theory. It has been lived. There were times in my life when I was pinned to the past by words, caught in should have, and if only. Other times when I was imprisoned by the future, the what if, and when this happens made the present unlivable. Over time, I learned that recognizing the grammar of my own speech was part of recognizing the grammar of my own mind, and that recognition opened doors into how reality could shift. So in this episode, we ask, how does language shape time? How do tense, grammar, and metaphor organize the past, present, and future we think we live in? And is it possible to liberate ourselves into different futures by changing the words we use? We'll move in layers. Part 1, the grammar of time. How tenses, conditionals, and temporal structures shape perception, memory, and fear. Part 2, trauma memory and the lingering past. How speech traps pain in the present, and how new words can release it. Part 3, future spoken, unspoken. How different cultures mark or dissolve the future in language, and what that does to their orientation toward destiny. Part 4, beyond time, timeless speech. Mystical, poetic, and embodied language that escapes the ordinary timeline altogether. We begin then with the most technical but also the most intimate layer, grammar itself. The grammar of time as a linguistic architecture. Think about how often you speak in tenses without noticing. I was tired, I'm tired, I will be tired. 3 sentences. Same body, same feeling, but 3 entirely different worlds. The past tense places the exhaustion behind you, a memory, maybe fading. The present tense makes it immediate, alive, happening now. The future tense casts it forward, already anticipating fatigue before it arrives. This is not just grammar. It is metaphysics smuggled into everyday speech. Each tense creates a relation between self and time. Linguists call this tense aspect mood system. Tense locates the action in time. Aspect shapes whether it's complete, ongoing, or habitual. Mood frames whether it's certain, possible, or hypothetical. Together, these elements create a temporal architecture that every speaker lives inside. What fascinates me is that this architecture differs across languages, sometimes radically. Languages without tense take Mandarin Chinese. Verbs don't change for tense. He eats, he ate, he will eat. The same verb form applies. Context or particles may add clarity, but the verb itself is neutral. This means time isn't baked into every sentence. It emerges only when relevant. Or look at Hopi, a Native American language often discussed by linguist Benjamin Lee Whorf. Hopi doesn't divide time into past, present, and future. Instead, it distinguishes between what is manifest, already experienced, and what is becoming, in process or potential. Time is not a line of befores and afters, but a rhythm of unfolding. For speakers of such languages, the weight of time is different. The future isn't constantly pressed into grammar. The past isn't cemented by verb endings. Reality feels more fluid, less segmented. When I first encountered these examples, I realized how much English tethers us to timelines. It forces us to constantly mark what was, is, or will be. That makes English efficient for precision, but it also cultivates habits of regret and anxiety. It keeps us obsessively dividing time instead of inhabiting it. The conditional spell. Nowhere is this clearer than in conditional tenses. If only I had. If I were. If this happens, then. Conditionals are the grammar of possibility, regret, and manipulation. They create worlds that don't exist but still weigh on us as though they did. Political speech thrives on them. If we don't act now, disaster will follow. Advertising thrives on them. If you buy this, your life will improve. Interpersonal guilt thrives on them. If you really loved me, you would. I've noticed in my own reflections how conditional speech can trap the nervous system. The if-onlys of the past keep wounds open. The what-ifs of the future trigger fear before anything happens. Both rob the present of air. This is why I think of conditionals as a kind of microspell. They conjure possible worlds, then force us to live as though those worlds are inevitable. They don't just describe, they bind. The grammar of fear and regret. If conditionals are microspells, then regret and fear are their natural habitats. Regret is essentially past conditional. If only I had done differently. Fear is future conditional. If this happens, then I will suffer. Together, they keep us oscillating between what cannot be changed and what may never occur. Both are powered by language. Think of how often trauma survivors replay events in if-only constructions, or how political rhetoric inflates threats through endless if-then scenarios. Without conditionals, fear and regret would lose much of their scaffolding. This doesn't mean conditionals are inherently bad. They also allow for hope, imagination, and planning. If we try, then we may succeed. But like all grammar, they shape worlds unconsciously. They bend our perception of time into loops we may not realize we're trapped in. Cross-cultural temporalities. One of the most striking things about studying languages is seeing how different cultures relate to time. In English, time is money. We spend it, save it, waste it. In Aymara, an indigenous language of the Andes, the past is conceived as in front because it is visible, and the future as behind because it is unseen. In Indonesian, there is no obligatory future tense marker. Uncertainty is always assumed. These metaphors and grammar matter. They don't just reflect culture, they reproduce it. An English speaker trained to waste not time will live differently from an Indonesian speaker for whom the future is never fixed. For me, this recognition softened something. It showed me that the way I was trained to think about time, as a line, as money, as something always pressing forward, wasn't universal. It was linguistic, and that meant it could change. Reflection prompt. Listen to the phrases that echo in your own speech. Do you often say if only? Do you often say when this happens? Do you live more in past tenses or in future projections? Notice how your grammar of time is also your grammar of self. Activity. Here's a practice you can try. 1. For one day, notice every conditional phrase you speak or hear. 2. Write them down, if only I had. If this happens, if you do this. 3. At the end of the day, review them. Which ones kept you in regret? Which ones pulled you into fear? Which ones opened possibilities? 4. Consider, how might your perception of time shift if you alter just one of those phrases? Grammar isn't abstract. It is the skeleton of time in our minds. Every tense and condition is a tiny clock ticking in language, and those clocks shape how we remember, how we anticipate, how we fear, and how we hope. In part 2, we'll go deeper into memory and trauma, how language pins the past to the present, and how new words can open doors into futures we didn't think possible. Time and trauma. There's a phrase we hear often in everyday speech. They're stuck in the past. It's usually said with impatience, as if the person simply refuses to move on. But when I began to really think about it, and live through it myself, I realized how deeply linguistic that statement is. Stuck in the past trauma is not just memory. It is memory wrapped in language, replayed in tense after tense. It is not simply an event that happened, but an event that continues to happen every time the words drag it back into the present. When someone says, I was hurt, that's past tense. The grammar places the wound behind them, however faintly. But when they say, I am broken, that's present tense. The grammar enacts the wound in the now. And when they say, I will never be safe, that's the future tense, projecting pain forward like a shadow across years not yet lived. This is why trauma feels like entrapment. It colonizes all three dimensions of grammatical time. It sits behind us, it sits inside us, and it blocks what lies ahead. The spell of tension turns pain into an ongoing prison. I've known this feeling. Times when I couldn't stop replaying events, hearing the same, if only sentences again and again. My tongue didn't just describe what had happened, it recreated it. Words became loops, and those loops spent time back on itself. Which is why trauma recovery so often begins with the smallest act, recognizing the language that holds us. Neuroscience of memory. For a long time, psychologists imagined memory as a kind of recording device, storing and replaying events. But neuroscience has shown us something stranger. Memory is not a replay. It is a reconstruction. Every time we recall, the brain reassembles fragments, sensory details, emotional tones, and linguistic labels. And in that reconstruction, language plays a pivotal role. Words don't just label memories, they shape how memories are stored, recalled, and interpreted. Elizabeth Loftus's work on false memories makes this starkly clear. In classic experiments, she showed how altering a single verb in a question changed participants' recollections of an event. If asked how fast cars were going when they smashed versus bumped, participants not only gave different speed estimates, but even recalled non-existent broken glass. Language didn't just describe memory, it rewrote it. Now imagine that applied to trauma. A memory of harm is already volatile, already charged. Each time it's spoken, narrated, or even silently replayed, words can alter its structure. Trauma survivors may reframe themselves as victims, survivors, or fighters, and each grammatical shift subtly resculpts the memory, and with it, the sense of self. The haunting truth is that we never recall an original trauma. We recall the last version we told ourselves. And that version is always shaped by the grammar we used. Collapse of grammar. Flashbacks. If memory is reconstruction, then PTSD is the breakdown of that process. Flashbacks are not simply remembering. They are the collapse of grammar. The past tense slips, and suddenly the event is felt as though it is present. It happened becomes it is happening. The nervous system cannot distinguish then from now. Survivors often describe this with phrases like, I was right back there. It was like it was happening again. There was no past or present, just terror. In those moments, time folds, and language fails. Words dissolve into sensation, panic, silence. Neuroscientific studies support this. Imaging of the brain during flashbacks shows overactivation in the amygdala, the fear center, and underactivation in Broca's area, the language processing region. The body relives, while the tongue falls mute. Trauma becomes unspeakable not out of choice, but out of neurological overload. This is why trauma can feel timeless. Without language to pin it to the past tense, it refuses to stay behind. It bursts into the present, raw and unfinished. The language of therapy healing, then, is not about erasing the past. It is about restoring it, about reintroducing grammar into a collapse of time. Narrative therapy builds on this insight. Rather than treating trauma as a fixed wound, it treats it as a story that can be retold, reframed, and reauthored. The survivor learns to place events into the past tense again, to draw boundaries with words. It happened, but it is over. Cognitive processing therapy for PTSD works similarly. Survivors are guided to write about their trauma, not to relive it, but to reframe it. To shift sentences from I am powerless to I was powerless then, but now I. That single tense shift creates distance. It turns an eternal present into a contained past. And yet, therapy is not just about the past tense. It is also about dissolving harmful conditionals. Survivors often live in if-then traps. If I let myself relax, then I'll be attacked. Therapy works to dismantle these loops, replacing them with new, gentler possibilities. If I rest, then I may feel safe. What struck me in my own professional development, and in reflecting on my own writing projects, is how powerful it can be simply to name. In My Inner Child Was Broken, I explored how silence around childhood wounds left whole parts of me without language. Giving words to those fractures didn't erase them, but it began to integrate them. It began to pin pain into a story that could be held rather than a terror that burst through the walls of time. Trauma's lingering spell. The danger is that trauma can also create its own linguistic habits, self-descriptions that harden into spells. I'm broken. I will always fail. I can never trust. These are not mere sentences. They are incantations. Each repetition deepens the groove until identity itself fuses with grammar. This is where earlier reflections on diagnosis also resonate. Labels like depressed, bipolar, or ADHD can help explain, but they can also trap. Once spoken, they risk becoming eternal presence. I am. What began as a description can harden into destiny. I've seen this not just in myself, but in people around me. The way words given by authority figures, doctors, teachers, parents, become scripts we live inside. The label itself becomes a time trap, freezing possibilities into rigid grammar. Breaking these spells requires vigilance. It requires asking, is this sentence true, or is it simply habitual? Is this grammar self-descriptive or prescriptive? Do I want to keep carrying this tense, or can I rewrite it? Reflection prompt: think of one painful memory that still lingers. Notice the grammar you use when you describe it. Do you say it happened, past tense? Or it is happening, present tense? Or it will always haunt me, future tense? Now consider, what shifts if you alter the grammar? Activity. Here's a practice you can try. 1. Choose one painful memory. Write it down in the tense you usually use. Example, I'm worthless. 2. Now rewrite it in the past tense. I felt worthless then. 3. Rewrite again in conditional. If I felt worthless, it was because I was surviving. 4. Rewrite once more in resolved form. I felt worthless then, but I am growing now. 5. Read each version aloud. Notice how your body responds. This exercise isn't about denying the past. It's about loosening the grammar that keeps the past alive in the wrong way. Trauma is a wound of time, but also a wound of grammar. It collapses tense, freezes conditionals, and turns sentences into cages. Healing is not erasure, it is reclamation. It is placing pain back into the past tense where it belongs, while opening new futures with gentler words. In part 3, we'll explore how cultures differently imagine the future itself, sometimes certain, sometimes uncertain, sometimes unmarked altogether. Because the way a language is spoken, the future shapes how its people walk toward it. Future spoken and unspoken. If the past can haunt us in language, the future can imprison us too. And not just through fear or imagination, but through the grammar of the tongue itself. Futures we carry in grammar English makes the future explicit. We say, I will go, I will work, I will change. The word will functions like a bridge, marking tomorrow as something distinct from today. But not every language does this. In Mandarin, for example, there is no obligatory future tense. Context does the work. Tomorrow I go. The lack of a grammatical marker doesn't mean the Chinese-speaking mind cannot imagine the future, but it does mean the future is less rigidly separated from the present. This has consequences. Economist Keith Chen found that speakers of futureless languages, like Mandarin, Finnish, or German, where the present and future share structures, were more likely to save money, smoke less, and invest in long-term health. Why? Because the future didn't feel like a distant country. It was folded into the present linguistically and psychologically. Meanwhile, English and French, with sharp distinctions between present and future, fostered behaviors more focused on immediate consumption. The grammar of time bent the ethics of planning. This makes me wonder, how much of what we call culture is actually a side effect of grammar? Conditional futures, fear and manipulation. If the future tense opens one path, conditional tenses open thousands. If you don't do this, you will regret it. If we act now, we can still survive. If you fail then, conditionals are the grammar of persuasion, fear, and control. They project possible futures and bind present behavior to them. Advertising thrives on this. If you buy this product, you will be happy. Religion too. If you sin, you will suffer. Politics leans on it endlessly. If we don't stop now, they will destroy us. Conditionals don't just describe futures, they colonize them. They cast entire populations into anticipation and dread. They make us live in futures that may never arrive. I think of the times I've caught myself speaking in loops of regret. If only I had. If I hadn't. If things were different. Those words didn't change the past. They constructed a haunting alternative future that fed sorrow in the present. This is why conditional grammar is so powerful in therapy and self-work. Reframing if I fail, I'll be worthless into if I stumble, I'll learn shifts the emotional weight entirely. The structure is the same. The spell is transformed. Metaphors of time beyond grammar. Languages also encode time through metaphor. In English, time is a line. The past is behind us. The future is ahead. We look forward to things. We put the past behind us. Our grammar moves through space. But in Aymara, an indigenous language of the Andes, the metaphor flips. The past is in front, visible and known. The future is behind, unseen and unknowable. This reframes life entirely. We walk backwards into tomorrow, facing what has already been. In Hopi, time is not linear but cyclical. Events repeat like seasons. The grammar reflects this, less about before and after, more about recurrence and unfolding. Each metaphor bends consciousness differently. Linear time fosters progress narratives, history as march and future as conquest. Cyclical time fosters patience and ritual. Tomorrow will echo yesterday. The Aymara vision fosters humility. You can see the past, but not what's coming. When I reflect on my own projects, I see these metaphors at work. The Linguaverse often writes time as cyclical, illusions, and indoctrinations repeating across generations. My inner child was broken is framed by backward steps, facing the past to walk into the future. And the Linguaverse itself, here, plays with linearity, each episode numbered forward, but always spiraling back into earlier questions. The metaphors we inherit seep into the stories we tell, and into the selves we construct. Philosophical reflections on the future philosophers have long wrestled with whether the future is real. Augustine admitted he could not define time. The past no longer exists, the future does not yet exist, and the present slips away instantly. So what is time? A mystery on the tongue. For Heidegger, the future was central to human existence. We are beings toward death, always projecting ourselves forward, haunted by what is not yet. Our very consciousness is structured by anticipation. But what if grammar amplifies this? What if the relentless will of English makes us future obsessed, constantly planning, fearing, regretting, and rarely dwelling in the present? And what if other grammars offer different modes of being? When I sit with this, I see how language doesn't just reflect metaphysics, it creates it. A culture that constantly says, I will may be doomed to always feel behind, chasing futures that recede like mirages. The future as uncertainty. One of the most striking differences between languages is how they encode certainty. In English, we say, it will rain tomorrow, a confident prediction. In Turkish, the grammar forces you to specify whether you know something or merely heard it. In Quechua, you must mark whether something is witnessed or inferred. In Japanese, the future is often framed with uncertainty particles, maybe, probably, I think. These linguistic habits create cultures with different orientations to uncertainty. Some lean toward bold predictions, others toward humility. Some build futures as guarantees, others as probabilities. This has global consequences. Economic systems, scientific claims, and political promises are all framed through the grammar of certainty or doubt. And in personal life too, saying I will succeed feels different from I might succeed. Both shape the nervous system. Both bend their behavior toward the future they speak of. The price of prediction. We live in a world obsessed with prediction. Algorithms forecast our choices. Economists model growth. Climate scientists warn of rising seas. Politicians promise. Marketers predict your desires before you know them yourself. Prediction is grammar turned industrial. Conditionals, futures, probabilities, automated, quantified, fed back into our lives. It is the future tense outsourced to machines. But prediction also carries risk when we begin to live as though forecasts are fate. If the model says the economy will collapse, fear spreads like contagion. If the data says crime will rise, police act preemptively. If algorithms say we want something, we often begin to want it. The future becomes a closed loop, not a possibility, but a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like reflection. My work as time spell. When I look at my own writing, I see how much of it has been an attempt to bend time through words. The Inversiverse was about naming patterns in society, illusions from the past repeating into the present, shaping the future unless we wake up. My Inner Child Was Broken was about reframing memory, lifting past wounds into language so they no longer define the future. The Linguaverse itself is about planting seeds, episodes that might sprout differently in different listeners, some today, some years from now. Each project has been, in a way, a grammar of time. Naming, reframing, and projecting. A kind of spell work across tenses. Reflection prompt. Think about how you speak about the future. Do you often say, I will, I might, I hope, I should? Notice the grammar. Does it feel certain, hesitant, fearful, or open? Now ask, how does that grammar shape your experience of time itself? Activity. Here's something to try. 1. Write down a simple sentence about your future. For example, I will change careers. 2. Rewrite it in multiple forms. Past tense, I change careers. Present tense, I'm changing careers. Conditional, if I change careers, I might. Uncertain, I may change careers. 3. Read each aloud. Notice how each version feels in your body. Which opens possibilities? Which creates fear? Which motivates? The grammar of the future is not neutral. It bends your nervous system, your imagination, your choices. Time is not just clocks and calendars. It is grammar, metaphor, tense, and conditional. Some languages fold the future into the present. Others project it outward like a horizon. Some frame it as probability, others as promise. Some see it ahead, some behind, some as a circle repeating forever. We live inside these grammars without noticing, and yet they quietly shape how we save, spend, plan, regret, and hope. In the next part, we'll turn to how collective memory and narrative stitch time together, not just in personal trauma or cultural metaphor, but in the shared myths and histories that tell us where we've been and where we're going. Because to speak of time is always to speak of story, and the stories we choose to tell are the futures we walk into. Collective time is not only personal, it is collective. If grammar shapes how individuals imagine the future, then calendars, histories, and shared narratives shape how whole communities march into it together. The social fabric of time, every society encodes time, not just in clocks and dates, but in stories. Sacred calendars, national anniversaries, seasonal rituals, political slogans, all these frame who we are and where we are going. Language is the adhesive. We don't just live in time, we live in the way time is spoken. Calendars, as cultural scripts calendars, are more than tools for measuring days. They are linguistic blueprints for reality. The Gregorian calendar, adopted globally, encodes Christian history into the very numbering of years. 2025 CE means Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord. Even secular societies, using Common Era, carry the residue of this religious marking of time. Every contract signed, every birthday celebrated, is nested inside a Christian linguistic frame. Other traditions remind us this isn't inevitable. The Mayan calendar worked in cycles of backturns, envisioning history not as a line, but as repeating cosmic turns. The Islamic calendar begins with the Hijra, Muhammad's migration, embedding collective memory in the very reckoning of time. The Chinese calendar operates on zodiac cycles, binding human destiny to animals and elements. These calendars are time spells. They don't just track hours, they narrate belonging. They tell us where we come from, what matters, and when cycles of renewal or crisis will return. Even our secular obsession with January 1st as New Year's Day is ritualized spell work. We chant resolutions, we measure progress, we restart the cycle. A purely invented point in orbit becomes a psychological hinge because the calendar tells us it is so. History as story, not fact. Collective time, is not only about when we are, but what happened before. History is not a neutral record. It is a narrative, edited, trimmed, emphasized, silenced. What is remembered and what is forgotten depends on language. Consider how nations speak of themselves. The United States tells its story through founding fathers, manifest destiny, and freedom. Britain invokes the Blitz spirit, empire, and resilience. Each phrase compresses centuries into slogans, selective and mythic. When governments erase atrocities or reframe defeats as victories, they aren't just rewriting history, they are reshaping collective time. School textbooks become linguistic battlegrounds where generations inherit edited pasts. This is what Benedict Anderson called the imagined community. Nations exist not because everyone knows one another, but because they share a common story of time, a remembered past, a claimed continuity. Nostalgia as a time spell. Few linguistic forces are more powerful than nostalgia. Make America great again. Take back control. Return to traditional values. These slogans do not describe time neutrally. They cast time spells, pulling entire populations backwards into a mythic golden age. The past becomes a weapon, invoked as simpler, purer, stronger. Whether that past ever existed is irrelevant. The spell works by evoking feeling, not fact. Nostalgia has always been political. Mussolini promised to restore the glory of Rome. Brexit invoked Britain's pre-EU independence. Nationalist parties across the world speak in the grammar of restoration. Back again, return. What strikes me is how linguistic these promises are. The future is not described as innovation, but as recovery. Hope is transmuted into retroactive longing. And people rally, not because they can empirically verify the past, but because the words conjure emotional time travel. In my own work, I've often warned about the danger of living in loops, social or personal. Nostalgic slogans are collective loops. They hypnotize societies into rehearsing the same wounds, the same myths, as if progress could be made by running backwards. Prophecy and deadlines. If nostalgia drags us into the past, prophecy drags us into imagined futures. Prophetic time has always been linguistic. From apocalyptic scriptures to revolutionary manifestos, societies have been bound by words promising an end or a new beginning. The kingdom of God is at hand. Workers of the world unite. The end of days. Modern prophecy lives on in secular form. Climate deadlines, technological predictions, demographic warnings. Scientists say we have 10 years to act. Activists chant future generations will judge us. Governments announce 2030 targets. These are not just dates, they are spells. They compress urgency, morality, and identity into a timeline. To doubt them is not simply to question numbers, but to risk exclusion from the moral collective. Of course, deadlines can motivate. The ozone crisis improved when a collective prophecy, the whole widening, catastrophe looming, mobilized action. But deadlines can also paralyze. When people hear too late, apathy spreads. Language shapes whether the future feels open or closed. This tension between prophecy as mobilizer and prophecy as doom is crucial in understanding how words construct our collective sense of time. Climate crisis as temporal struggle. The climate crisis is at heart a linguistic crisis of time. We talk about future generations as if they are distant, but they are already here. Children alive today will potentially inherit rising seas. Yet the phrase creates distance, delaying urgency. We say tipping points and deadlines as though the earth operates on bureaucratic calendars. These metaphors motivate action but can also trap us in fatalism. Contrast indigenous languages where the land itself is woven into temporality. In many Native American traditions, decisions are framed in terms of the seventh generation, not as a deadline but as a moral horizon. This stretches time differently, not urgency of years but continuity of care. The language of the climate movement is not just strategy, it is spellcraft. It determines whether people feel possibility or despair. And in a world of algorithms and sound bites, these time spells circulate faster than ever. Binding communities through time-shared time is what binds groups. Religious communities gather on Fridays, Saturdays, or Sundays, each rhythm creating a collective pulse. Nations pause for holidays, Independence Days, Remembrance Days, each naming what must be remembered and when. These are not trivial. They are linguistic anchors that synchronize millions of bodies and minds. They say, now we mourn together, now we celebrate together, now we fight together. But shared time also divides. Competing calendars fracture societies, lunar versus solar calendars, colonial versus indigenous time, secular versus religious schedules. Even daylight saving time becomes political. The language of time is a weapon and a bomb. It builds solidarity, but it also polices belonging. Those who do not keep the same time are cast as outsiders. Personal reflection. I often think about how my projects, the Inversiverse, the Linguaverse, my inner child was broken. The unfiltered human on the fringe and the body knows each grapple with time differently. The Inversiverse critiques how societies loop us into illusions, recycling myths and manipulations. My inner child was broken looks backwards, reframing memory to loosen its grip on the present. The Linguaverse projects forward, imagining futures of speech and thought. Together, they remind me, personal and collective time are inseparable. The labels we carry, the slogans we hear, and the calendars we follow all intertwined. To write about language is always to write about time. Reflection prompt. Think of 3 phrases you hear often about the future. We're running out of time. The best is yet to come. It's too late. Now notice what vision of time each one sells. Is it hopeful? Urgent? Defeated? Who benefits from that framing? Who loses? Language doesn't just describe time, it recruits us into it. Activity. Here's something to try. 1. Write down 3 phrases about the future you encounter regularly in politics, media, family, and religion. 2. For each, ask, what emotion does it evoke? Hope, fear, guilt, urgency? What kind of future does it imagine? Restoration, collapse, innovation? What action does it invite? Wait, panic, build, submit? 3. Finally, ask yourself, do I accept this vision of time, or do I want to cast a different one? This activity isn't abstract. It's a way of noticing the time spells you already live inside. Once you see them, you can choose whether to obey, resist, or rewrite them. Collective time is not given, it is spoken. Calendars, slogans, prophecies, and climate deadlines, each is a spell, binding us to shared rhythms and imagined futures. Some unite, some divide, some liberate, some control. If part 2 showed how trauma traps us in past grammar, part 3 reveals how societies trap or free themselves through shared narratives of time. In the next part, we'll move deeper into philosophy and grammar, how language itself encodes fear, regret, and possibility, bending not just collective calendars, but individual nervous systems toward or away from freedom in time. Because time is not just measured, it is lived. And we live it through words. Philosophy of time in language. We've been tracing how language shapes our experience of time through grammar, memory, trauma, and collective stories. But here, we need to step into the deeper waters, where philosophy and linguistics meet the very core of human perception. The question of time in language, because time is not just a neutral backdrop, ticking away on a clock somewhere. Time is something we live, breathe, and narrate. And the medium through which we narrate language does not just reflect our temporal awareness, it actively constructs it. When you pause to think about it, something is astonishing in how easily words can stretch, compress, or even dissolve time. A single phrase like once upon a time can transport us backwards into myth. Someday can open up a horizon of possibilities. Never again can freeze a moment into eternal warning. We carry entire temporal landscapes in the syllables we speak. But there is also a darker side to this. Certain phrases, especially in relationships, politics, or therapy, can suspend us in loops of waiting or regret. The words that mark time can trap us as much as they can free us. And the nervous system does not distinguish between linguistic time and real time. When the grammar of delay or regret takes hold, the body reacts as if the moment is actually happening, over and over again. This is why philosophers from Augustine to Heidegger to Bergson obsessed over the mystery of time, and why linguists and psychologists continue to study how tenses and moods sculpt our perception. Because at the heart of human life lies a paradox. We do not live in time itself, but in the language of time. Philosophical anchors. The philosophical inquiry into time is vast, but 3 figures give us powerful entry points: Augustine, Heidegger, and Bergson. Each highlights how deeply bound our experience of temporality is to words and concepts. Augustine wrestled with time in his Confessions. His famous question, "What is time?" If no one asks me, I know. If I want to explain it, I do not know, captures the paradox. He argued that the past exists only as memory, the future only as anticipation, and the present is so fleeting it's almost nothing at all. Yet through language, we stitch these 3 together into something livable. Without words like yesterday, tomorrow, and now, Augustine's fragile structure of time collapses. Heidegger, centuries later, reimagined time as being toward death. For him, temporality wasn't simply about clocks or calendars, but about how language projects us into the future. Words like not yet, one day, and eventually carry with them the weight of finitude. Every deferral is also a reminder of mortality. His focus was on how human beings interpret their existence through temporal language, how our vocabulary of delay or urgency shapes our sense of life itself. Bergson offered another perspective. For him, clock time was a distortion. Real time or duration was lived time, flowing, indivisible, qualitative. Yet our languages, obsessed with tenses and divisions, break duration into artificial segments. We turn the seamless flow into units, and in doing so, we subtly reshape our perception. These philosophers remind us our sense of time is not out there waiting to be measured. It is in here, structured and sculpted by the words we use. Grammar of fear and regret nowhere is the binding power of temporal language clearer than in the grammar of fear and regret. Conditional tenses, in particular, create loops of unreal time that trap the mind. If only I had, leads the past unreal conditional. A grammatical structure dedicated to regret. It doesn't just recall the past, it rewrites it, creating a phantom timeline that never existed. What if I leads to a future hypothetical. Anxiety crystallized into words. A single phrase can project us into dozens of possible futures, most of which never materialize. Psychologists note that these conditional constructions are central to rumination and worry. They hold the nervous system hostage in what cognitive science calls counterfactual thinking. The body experiences regret and fear as if they are happening in real time. Heart rate rises, muscles tense, and cortisol surges. Language doesn't just describe the loop, it is the loop. Consider the hours, days, even years of human life spent trapped inside these moods of grammar. Entire lives are shaped by the if-onlys and what-ifs. Whole nervous systems trained to wait for futures that never arrive, or to mourn pasts that cannot return. Scenario: waiting and relational time. To make this concrete, let's step into a scenario almost everyone has experienced: waiting for someone else's commitment. Imagine a relationship where one person says, "I'm just not ready yet. Maybe later. Things will change. Give me more time." These phrases sound innocuous, even reasonable, but linguistically, they function as spells of suspension. The partner who hears them is caught in a grammar of delay, a future that is perpetually deferred. From the perspective of the nervous system, this is devastating. Biologically, human bonding is tied to timing. Hormones like oxytocin, dopamine, and vasopressin synchronize rhythms of attachment. When language introduces indefinite delay, those rhythms become dysregulated. The waiting partner is pulled into vigilance, scanning for signals, their system oscillating between hope and despair. Evolutionarily, mating and social bonding relied on clear signals: readiness, availability, and reciprocity. But modern language allows for ambiguity as control. What once would have been a clear yes or no can now be stretched into endless not yets. This phenomenon has been studied in psychology under terms like future faking, where promises of commitment or change are dangled to control the present. Linguistically, it is a manipulation of tense. The speaker pushes resolution into an imaginary future while harvesting power in the now. The result is an internal dialogue for the waiting partner that becomes saturated with time phrases. "I'll wait. They'll come around. Just a little longer." Each phrase functions like an incantation, reinforcing inertia. And the longer this continues, the more the self becomes bound in a cycle of linguistic waiting. Time as energy and perception. What's striking is how directly this plays out in energy and perception. Waiting is exhausting, not because nothing is happening, but because too much is happening inside. The nervous system burns energy maintaining readiness. The mind cycles through conditional scenarios. The body holds tension in muscles and breath. Here we see again how language and biology intertwine. A phrase like "maybe later" doesn't just create a semantic delay, it produces somatic strain. Conversely, phrases like "now is the time" or "I choose today" can release that tension. Words act as triggers for physiological states, expanding or contracting the field of possibility. This isn't confined to relationships. Institutions use the same tactics. Politics: the time is not right. Corporations: coming soon. Bureaucracy: please wait. Each of these phrases enacts temporal power. They manage populations by managing the grammar of time. The individual is held in suspension, their energy redirected into waiting rather than acting. Manipulative time language beyond relationships. The linguistic strategies of delay appear everywhere once you learn to see them. Governments invoke "not now" to avoid reform. Companies use "soon" to string along consumers. Even algorithms manage our waiting, with endless loading screens or estimated delivery times. Philosophers like Foucault and Ivan Illich argued that modern institutions regulate not only our space, but also our time. And they do this largely through language. "Every your call is important to us. Please hold" is a linguistic tool for normalizing subordination. Waiting becomes a political and economic tool, and the phrases that produce it are as potent as any ancient curse. Stepping out of the grammar of waiting. So the crucial question is, how do we step out of these temporal traps? One answer lies in silence. By refusing the language of delay, by withdrawing from the internal incantations of "not yet," and "if only," we begin to recover a different relationship to time. Heidegger pointed to this in his reflections on authenticity, facing finitude directly, stepping into the present without postponement. Another answer lies in reframing, recasting phrases of delay into phrases of choice. From I'll wait for them to I act for myself today. From not now to this matters now. Neuroscience shows that such reframing can reduce activation in the amygdala and increase regulation in the prefrontal cortex. In other words, the nervous system literally shifts out of hypervigilance into agency, personal reflection, and integration. Looking back across my own work, the Inversiverse, my inner child was broken, the unfiltered human, I see how often time language shaped both the struggles and the breakthroughs. Diagnoses, delays, promises, and regrets each operated like spells of time. But by rephrasing, by recognizing the linguistic structures, I could shift perception. This is not about persuasion or ideology. It is about offering language as a mirror, an alternative view that each person can test for themselves. Activity, the Time Spell Journal 1. Write down 5 phrases about time that you hear regularly in your life, from partners, colleagues, politicians, or even your own inner voice. Examples: not now, maybe later, one day if only, what if? 2. For each phrase, pause and notice how it lands in your body. Does it tighten your chest, slow your breath, create fatigue or urgency? 3. Then rewrite each phrase in empowering form. Shift the tense or mood from not yet to I begin today, from later to this matters now. 4. Finally, reflect. How does your nervous system respond when you reframe the grammar of time? What happens to your energy, perception, and sense of agency? This practice is not about denying reality, but about reclaiming the way language mediates our experience of time. So where does this leave us? We've seen that time is not just measured by clocks or calendars. It is built, broken, and bent by words. The grammar of fear and regret can bind us. The phrases of waiting can drain us. Institutions, partners, and even our own inner voices can cast temporal spells that suspend us in unreal times. But we've also seen that language can be liberating. By noticing, reframing, or even stepping into silence, we can reclaim agency. Time, then, is not something we simply endure. It is something we co-create through the words we use, the stories we accept, and the phrases we choose to live by. And this brings us naturally to where we go next. Because if time can be manipulated by language, so too can value. If time is money, as the saying goes, and if words structure time, then words themselves have become a kind of currency. That's the focus of episode 18, the economics of words, language as currency, reflection, time's double bind. As we close this episode, I want to bring the conversation back to you, the listener. We've explored the grammar of past, present, and future. We've traced how languages frame time, some stretching it, some compressing it, some leaving it almost absent altogether. We've seen how trauma collapses tenses, how politics weaponizes nostalgia, how conditional moods keep us rehearsing unreal timelines. But beneath all of this, a question hums quietly. When has language itself trapped you in the past? And when has it opened a door to the future? Think of regret. The words you used, if only I had. I should have. Why didn't I? Each one tied you to an alternate past that never existed. You may have replayed it dozens of times, each time reactivating the nervous system as if the moment were real. In that sense, grammar became a prison. Now think of hope. The words that gave you light. It's possible. I can begin again. Tomorrow I'll try differently. Those phrases opened the time. They allowed new futures to be imagined, futures that were not yet visible, but became real through language. The same tongue can shackle and set free. The same structures that replay pain can rewrite possibilities. When I look back across my own work, I see this pattern everywhere. In trauma, the grammar of repetition kept whole chapters of my story frozen. In healing, it was a shift in words that unfroze them. Naming what had been unspeakable, reframing the timeline, creating new narratives of continuity instead of rupture. This is not just personal, it is universal. Every human life is a negotiation with temporal grammar. Every society is a weaving of tenses and moods into shared calendars, prophecies, and promises. Language gives us access to the past and projection into the future, but it also threatens to trap us in timelines that no longer serve. So the task is not to escape language. It is worth noting its temporal spells. To ask, which words bind me and which words open me? Activity, the temporal diary. Here's a practice to make this concrete. The temporal diary. For one day, keep track of how often you speak in the past, present, or future tense. Step 1, awareness. Keep a small notebook or open a notes app. Each time you catch yourself saying something about the past, I should have emailed them. That was fun yesterday. The present, I feel tired right now. Or the future, I'll do it tomorrow, maybe later. Jot it down. Step 2, categorize. At the end of the day, review your entries. Count how many times you spoke in each tense. Was your speech dominated by the past, the present, or the future? Step 3, reflect somatically. Notice how each tense felt in your body. Did past tense phrases bring heaviness, nostalgia, regret? Did present tense phrases anchor you, or did they sometimes feel claustrophobic? Did future tense phrases energize you, or did they create anxiety? Step 4, reframe. Choose one phrase from each category and rewrite it in another tense. For example, past to present. I should have spoken up reframed as I am speaking up now. Future to present. I'll rest tomorrow reframed as I allow myself to rest today. Present to future. I'm stuck here reframed as I will move forward. See how the nervous system shifts when you change the grammar. Step 5. Integrate. Over time, you may begin to notice which tense dominates your inner world. If you're always in the past, you might be caught in regret or nostalgia. If you're always in the future, you might be caught in anxiety or deferral. If you're always in the present, you might be grounded, or you might be avoiding a longer-term perspective. Balance matters. The goal isn't to choose one tense over another. The goal is to reclaim awareness of how language scripts your perception of time, and to become a conscious author of those scripts. Language cannot erase trauma, stop clocks, or guarantee futures, but it can loosen the knots we tie around time. It can give us words that unfreeze memory, that lift us out of regret, that carry us toward new beginnings. It can remind us that while we cannot change what was, we can change the story of what was. And in changing the story, we change the body, the breath, the nervous system that carries it. In the end, perhaps time is neither prison nor open road, but a dialogue between what language makes of it and what silence still whispers beneath. As we close this 17th episode of the Linguaverse, I want to bring the threads together. We began with ancient questions, Augustine's puzzle, Heidegger's urgency, Bergson's flowing duration. We looked at the grammar of fear and regret, the conditional tenses that keep us trapped in phantom timelines. We traced how relationships, institutions, and even inner voices manipulate time through phrases of waiting and deferral. And we asked what it means to live not just in time, but in the language of time. The synthesis is clear. Language both chains us to old timelines and frees us into new ones. It is the tool by which we rehearse regret, but also the tool by which we imagine tomorrow. It is the trap that binds trauma, but also the key that unlocks healing. In the past few arcs, we've seen language as spell, as consciousness, as reality. Here, we've seen it as time. Each lens refracts the same truth. Words are not just carriers of meaning, they are makers of worlds. And this brings us to where we are heading next. Because if language can structure time, if a phrase can make us wait or move or reframe the past, then language also structures value. We already say time is money. But what if words themselves are currency? What if every slogan, every hashtag, every clickbait headline is not just a phrase, but a coin traded in the vast marketplace of attention? That is episode 18, The Economics of Words, Language as Currency. We'll explore how language has become a commodity, how it buys and sells focus, how it shapes economies of attention, and how the very marketplace of ideas is also a marketplace of spells. Thank you for journeying with me through the beginning of Arc 3, Hidden Tongues and Living Worlds. Stay attentive to the grammar of your own time. Notice when words bind you to old stories and when they open you into new ones. Every word is a clock you set inside yourself. The question is, what time are you keeping? You've been listening to the Linguaverse. I'm James Miller.